These headlines coming across all Fed districts reporting, quote, highly uncertain outlooks. Most businesses expect worsening conditions. How does that play through to the markets and the equities, specifically given that we have seen a little bit of a rally, not today, obviously, but yesterday we did, and there was a sense that, okay, investors, they're looking out a little bit further. Help us synthesize that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so a few things immediately come to mind. First, equities always look forward to the future and had priced for a pretty significant, some might even say very, very significant recession to emerge over the course of the second and potentially third quarters of this year. So we had gone through the most vicious correction. It's, it seems like a long way away already, but we did go through the most vicious correction since the 1920s in just 3 weeks' time. In the month of February and early March. We've bounced out of that in anticipation of now we will eventually reach recovery in 2021, but even more so, we've bounced out of that on the policy moves that the Fed as well as the fiscal authorities have made. I mean, it's no coincidence that stocks really did reach a pretty significant bottom just at the point when we started to see massive fiscal spending, we started to see massive Federal Reserve policy action. So a lot of what's been reflected in markets is just an adjustment to the valuation multiple to reflect extraordinary policy action, which generally does reinflate risk tolerance to some degree. I think we go through a period over the next several weeks, obviously, where we just have to contend with a lot of bad news. It remains to be seen if we priced in enough bad news on the earnings front. But so far what we're finding actually is stocks are reacting generally positively to bad news. And I think that's just a reflection of just how much policy support we have to get us through to at least August or September at this point.
Gina, some of the research that you have on the Bloomberg terminal today is, I love the line, stocks trade on 2021 recovery, which is what you just talked about, while companies focus on survival. And we're seeing that, whether it's airline stocks or energy stocks or, some other names, certainly in a lot of different industries, hotel and hospitality, anything to do with travel. You do also remind us that companies with China exposure should be in the spotlight, right? Because we can get some clues from them of what a post-virus recovery looks like.
Yeah, they're really the only sort of option for us to get an idea of what the outlook could be into the second half of this year and early 2021. I think there are a lot of skeptics out there with respect to China. Obviously, for years and years and years, many people have questioned the truth in the Chinese data. Is it manipulated? Is it actually really reflective of real economic activity? But one thing we generally don't question, and we tend to believe that we can trust, are U.S. companies operating in China. So I do think over the course of the next several weeks, you want to watch the companies that are operating in China. Those companies will face a lot of question and a lot of scrutiny on the part of investors as to what recovery does look like, because it's truly our only experience for what to consider as the outlook. The companies that are operating in the U.S. right now, especially the exclusively domestically focused companies, are only going to think about how to survive this absolute shutdown. They're just not going to get to the point of planning for recovery until we have a concept of even when we're going to start to get back to recovery. Instead, it's really about planning for the now. Yes, they always have an eye to the future, but the future is so opaque and uncertain right now, there's just not a lot of visibility or capacity to plan. The companies that can think about what that future looks like are experiencing some of it, presumably, in China. So I do think that it's kind of the only outlook commentary that we're going to get that is worth really considering.
All right. Good to check in with both of you. Thank you so much. Gina Martin-Adams, check out her research on the Bloomberg terminal, chief equity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. Dave Wilson, he's going to be back later with his chart and stock of the day, stocks editor at Bloomberg News.
All right, let's head over to Charlie Pellet now, get an update on the business headlines and the trade. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Jason Kelly. We're watching markets with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all lower. In fact, the S&P sinking from that one-month high. All of its major groups dropping. Banks lower as Goldman Sachs' investment portfolio took a hit from the coronavirus pandemic. Bank of America, Citigroup followed rivals and setting aside billions for loan losses. In terms of the banks, Goldman Sachs, up now by 1.5%. Bank of America lower by 5%. 5.3%. Citigroup shares down by 4.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude back above $20 a barrel. Right now at $20.28. It is up by 0.9%. Gold down 0.4%, lower by $7.50 the ounce at $17.19. The yield on the 10-year 0.68%. Stocks lower, as I mentioned. S&P down 58, down 2.1%. The Dow down 435, down 1.8%. Nasdaq down 102 points, a drop now of 1.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, banks, they, as they often do, set the tone and are setting the tone for the earnings season so far. Let's check in on what we've heard so far. And for that, we go to Ken Leon, Global Director of Industry and Equity Research over at CFRA Research, joining us on the phone from New York. So, Ken, Bank of America, Citi, other names that we've heard of, JP Morgan most notably yesterday. What's the theme that's emerging here?
The theme is really hunkering down with the expected of non-performing loans. We've seen $23 billion of provision of credit reserves. We wish this conversation would be after the second quarter. This is going to be a really tough period coming up over the next few months. Each of the managements are optimistic for some level of recovery in the second half of this year. So no one is speaking of a V-shaped recovery, but others are looking for some rebound. And that's important both from the standpoint of generating, fee income across capital markets and lending.
Well, and Ken, thank God that they've got, a bunch in reserves, right? This has turned out to be, one of the good things coming off the financial crisis. I want to ask you about a call you did. You actually raised your opinion on Goldman Sachs today to hold from sell. How come?
Goldman Sachs is less exposed in terms of to really traditional bank lending. They have a much smaller book in terms of consumer and commercial loans. Their provision was the smallest of the five banks that have reported so far, $937 million, mostly related to derivatives. And they can kind of sit out one quarter where we're going to see kind of dire results, related to traditional banking. Goldman also is moving to a new strategy to expand its asset and wealth management, and it's pretty aggressive on rates as a kind of virtual, not a bricks and mortar retail banker. So they turned out to be in a better position than I thought, going into a severe recession. One note here, which I think is important, is senior management and the economists at Goldman Sachs think that the recovery will only recover 50% of the output or the economic GDP 2020 into 21. That was by far the most bearish outlook I've heard in the last 2 days. Others simply don't know.
What is that? Let's dig into that if we can for a minute, Ken, because that means look well beyond the financial sector here. I mean, that is a radically changed and radically reduced global economy and domestic economy. How do you get your head around that?
Yeah, it is. And then Goldman's looking for a 30% decline in GDP in the second quarter, 6% decline for the full year. And what that means for the banks is their ability in terms of perhaps over-reserving in their credit reserves may not be as generous, which sometimes happens when things revert. And additionally, with a large capital markets platform for underwriting and also for advisory, it may be a more challenging market. I thought it was very bearish. I'm not sure that's going to be how things play out. Most of the other large banks, which have really, people on the ground for middle market community, they're probably in a better position. I would say, though, why I wish we were at the end of the second quarter, because these $23 billion of reserves added doesn't also take into account perhaps a further downturn in commercial real estate or some other distressed industries. A lot of it was mostly just on mass market with the consumer on credit cards.
And so, sorry, just a quick follow-up on something that you said a minute ago. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is some of these banks may need to right-size some of their operations to deal with a market that has less capital market activity, less M&A, IPOs, et cetera.
Some of the banks have said this week that there will be no layoffs in 2020, and they're being sensitive to stakeholders, which is really serving the public and employees. When you begin to look out or model into 2021 with a scenario of slower economic growth instead of a strong rebound, then we get to the answer of your question. Nobody wants to go to that part of the story yet, though.
But that's why, officials to some extent, Jason, we talked about this theme, last week, fear versus greed. I mean, there is also that concern that the longer we are shut down, the deeper this economic slide is, the tougher it is, Ken, to come out of it. And you don't recoup the lost economic activity, and you don't necessarily bring back all of those workers that maybe were furloughed. I mean, it's a different situation.
So, whether I think perhaps the steepness of the curve of recovery might be less. No one really wanted to speak to job cuts or expense reductions. And, I would say for today, it's all that you can do to cover yourself in terms of the potential of non-performing loans and charge-offs. I would say this, the banks are in a very strong position in terms of the balance sheet. Capital. Right. We've looked back to what was the pace of charge-offs back in 2008 and 9, and the ratio of total loans to total deposits much better today. So from a liquidity standpoint, they're in pretty good shape and the dividend is safe. The one bet here, and it gets back to this conversation of what does recovery look like, because we think the banks will underperform in the near term, but it's a very cyclical part of the market. So for investors looking for a rebound in the economy, banks generally outperform. That's our scenario for later this year. We hope we're right.
Well, and it's really interesting to hear you say that about the balance sheets and the liquidity, and Carol mentioned it at the top, and I guess I would just ask you the obvious question, which is, so did regulators and lawmakers maybe get something right coming out of the financial crisis and setting these guys up that they can weather this better than they did the last time around?
The answer is absolutely yes, and it really goes back to what the data looked like starting in 2012, when from Dodd-Frank, the stress tests were put into motion, and the banks have been going through this kind of stress test every year.
Yeah.
But the severe scenario is usually 10% unemployment for a full year. Hopefully we're below that. It's just really dark clouds right now because the second quarter just looks very ugly. But beyond that, it's going to be a question of how we recover and its impact both on households and on businesses.
Right. It's all connected. Right?
It's all connected.
It certainly does.
Yeah, we're learning that the hard way for sure.
Right? Ken Leon, that was an incredibly thoughtful conversation, taking those bank earnings and really digging into what we need to know. So thank you so much. Ken Leon, Global Director of Industry and Equity Research at CFRA Research. Jason joining us on the phone from New York City, right? Thoughtful.
Yeah. Smart.
Wow.
Super smart.
Great.
No doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, listen, the banks, everybody looks to them. They're very important. No matter what you think, they're important. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The Federal Reserve says the economy slammed on the brakes in recent weeks as the coronavirus tightened its grip. Its latest beige book found sharp declines in demand and widespread job cuts, with more on the way. Stocks are off their lows but still deep in the red. The market was already reeling from more gloomy bank earnings and government data showing a huge drop in March retail sales. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 419, the S&P 500 down 57, the Nasdaq Composite down 99. Some out-of-work apartment tenants are holding back rent. Others are delaying the inevitable by paying with plastic. Dow Jones reports rent payments made via credit card rose 13% in April from the first 3 months of the year. Apple is taking the wraps off its first low-cost smartphone in 4 years. The $400 iPhone SE utilizes an older design and lacks some features of newer models. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The market.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hiya, it's Mel B. I'm just calling to say whether you're searching for a babe, a boo, or a bit of fun, there's one B you can always rely on. Badoo, the dating app which matches you with people based on your interests. Now more than ever, we want to be connected. You're more than just a photo, so be your true self and connect with a like-minded community. There's a new B in town. Download the Badoo app today. Badoo, date honestly.
Hey y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these
City.
and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
If you've used TuneIn much, you probably already know how to favorite your top stations and podcasts for quick access. But did you know you can organize your favorites too? Under your favorites page on the TuneIn app, hold and drag the stations to arrange the order to your liking.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And coming up, we are going to get an update from the medical and health perspective. Obviously, this is, at the end of the day, the most important thing, how people are doing, how people are recovering, and what a recovery looks like as we try and get back out into the world, Carol.
And this says global cases top 2 million, so we'll get into that. Our experts at Johns Hopkins will be joining us in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to your top business stories and an update on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. Stocks are slumping, treasuries surging as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data from the U.S. economy added to concern over a severe global recession. S&P 500 index down 53 points now, a drop of 1.9%. Have been down as much as 3%. The Dow also off its session lows. Right now, the Dow is down 393 points, a drop there of 1.7%. NASDAQ down 89, a decline there of 1%. The 10-year up 1 2/32 with a yield of 0.64%. Gold is down 0.4%, 17.19 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.6%, now at $20 a barrel. Stocks are lower across the board, as I mentioned, again, recapping here with the S&P down 1.9%. Boston Scientific says it will start manufacturing a low-cost ventilator after the Food and Drug Administration granted the technology an emergency use authorization amid the coronavirus outbreak. Also says it will sell it for about 5% of the cost of rivals. Well, one of the big questions surrounding coronavirus is, have we seen a peak in cases? Lauren Sauer is assistant professor of emergency medicine at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I think it's a little too early to say whether it's fully cresting or not. We are seeing a slowdown in the number of increasing cases. We haven't, I don't think, peaked that curve yet, but we are starting to see slowdowns in the volume, and all the more reason to protect those measures that are in place, like social distancing, to ensure that those volumes don't spike right back up as soon as they sort of, quote-unquote, go back to normal.
And she was interviewed by our Tom Keene. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Oil falling below $20 a barrel before recovering right at $20 now after the International Energy Agency said demand will slump by a record this year despite a historic production cut deal over the weekend. We do have shares of both ExxonMobil and also Chevron declining today. Again, recapping the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining right now, with the S&P 500 index lower right now by 53 points, down 1.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Wednesday. We want to get right to it, get our latest update on the virus situation. Back with us, and welcome to have back with us, is Dr. Amish Adalja, who is an infectious disease physician at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health, joining us on the phone from Pittsburgh. Of course, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP. So, Dr. Adalja, nice to have you here with us. What are of the new developments in terms of tackling the virus are of note to you?
The biggest thing is the fact that places like New York City have likely plateaued and have been able to sustain their hospital capacity without going into full crisis standards of care, meaning that they didn't have to ration ventilators. Everybody that needed a ventilator got a ventilator. And that, I think, is reassuring, because I think New York will be probably the hardest hit city in this pandemic in the United States, and they have special considerations with population density and already very crowded hospitals. And if they can handle it, I think that really gives us a sigh of relief that other cities will be able to manage this with logistical support.
And so let's take that a step further, because obviously and hopefully you and many others have learned a lot from what we've seen in these big cities. What is being done differently maybe in this next wave of cities that are experiencing this now and candidly are going to experience bigger outbreaks as we go along? Is it different methods of social distancing? Is it testing? What have we learned that we're now putting into practice?
Well, everybody has had the opportunity to learn from New York and New Orleans and Detroit and Chicago. And it's important to know that it's not going to be the same in every city.
Sure.
And not all cities are going to have that same spike. Some may have more of a rolling outbreak. And, where I am in Pittsburgh, it's been very, very light, so much so that the hospitals are basically empty. And we have very few patients with COVID-19 in the hospital. So it's been something a little bit different here. But we've had the opportunity at this time to scale up diagnostic testing, to make sure that our health departments are fortified, make sure that hospital capacity has been assessed, and really think about which of the social distancing measures are the most important, because there's many of them that are in place, and some of them are more impactful than others, and some are more disruptive than others. So I do think we've had the opportunity in other cities to think about how to right-size the response to this outbreak, and I think it's been I think that's the way it should be, that it's not going to necessarily be a one-size-fits-all thing as we move through this pandemic, and different things are going to be more impactful in different areas.
So I have to ask you about a story I am obsessed with. It's on the Bloomberg terminal. I think I've tweeted it out twice, and I've sent it to our team.
That's saying something.
I know. I am totally obsessed. But it's about immunity, right? We've talked about tests that measure antibodies to the virus being touted as a major part to restart the economy and get people to work. But immunity is a spectrum, right? And so there are viruses that result in lifelong protection, such as chickenpox and measles. And then on the other end of that spectrum is things like HIV that doesn't usually provide any protective shield. So it's not so straightforward, right? So we've got to figure out how long do the antibodies in this virus, COVID-19, remain in the body? How long do they prevent infection, if at all? This is tricky.
It is tricky. Immunity is tricky. And I would say with HIV, just to clarify a little bit, there is no immunity to HIV. If you get exposed to HIV, you're not immune to it. You can get reinfected with it. Even if you have HIV, you can get a second strain, can infect you.
Right. Right. That's the other end of it. Right. Exactly.
Right. But what I would say about coronavirus is we know that there are, this is the seventh human coronavirus, and we do have a lot of information about the 4 coronaviruses that cause about 25% of our common colds. And we do know that you do develop immunity, but that immunity wanes over time, meaning that the levels of the antibodies fall as you get further away from your infection. And you can be reinfected, at least experimentally, with it. And most of those second infections are clinically silent, meaning that they don't have any symptoms at all. So we don't quite know the whole answer with this coronavirus. I do think it's reasonable to believe that we will have some immunity after people recover from that, but that immunity may not be ironclad over time, and there are going to be certain people that don't form very good antibodies after infection. So we have to come up with a standard way of looking at the antibodies and understanding what level is protective, what level is not protective. And I think there's a lot of science questions that need to be answered before we can fully act on all of the antibody data, at least at an individual level. I think it's still important to know who's been infected and who hasn't for a city trying to plan or a hospital trying to think about their capacity.
Right.
But for protection, I think we still have some answers to find.
Which is why the testing and tracing becomes so important, right? And this is why we keep hearing everybody talk about it.
All right. Really good stuff. We really appreciate it. Dr. Amesh Adalja, infectious disease physician for Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. That school, of course, supported by Mike Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Dr. Adalja joined us on the phone from Pittsburgh. Carol.
I am totally obsessed with that story.
I know.
Just because I think, we talk about things.
It's the big question.
Right? And you've got to pick into the specifics of it. Medicine is always tricky. All right, let's get back to our World and National News headlines. Let's get a check on that with Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. Supporters of the World Health Organization are criticizing President Trump's efforts to scapegoat the United Nations agency. The head of the WHO says he regrets the U.S. decision to pull funding for the agency and is calling for world unity to fight the pandemic, pointing out it's also busy fighting polio, measles, malaria, Ebola, HIV, tuberculosis, malnutrition, cancer, and many other conditions. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says they're assessing the impact.
We're assessing how our programs will be affected, and not only that, we will try to fill any gaps with partners. So we will get back to you after our assessment is completed.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, who works with the WHO through his Gates Foundation, says halting funding for a vital health agency during a global crisis is as dangerous as it sounds, that no other organization can replace them. There will be no forget about it when it comes to people wearing masks. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo is imposing a mask mandate, signing an executive order today requiring face coverings when people go out in public. He says it'll be a possible civil violation, though he doesn't want to have to threaten penalties.
People will enforce it. They'll say to you, if they're standing next to you on a street corner, "Where's your mask, buddy?" In a nice New York kind of way.
There's some flexibility in the policy. People can wear either a mask or a cloth covering over their mouth and nose. The policy will go into effect Friday. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested?
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
When we're stuck indoors all day, we might find our energy bills creeping up uninvited. The cheeky rascals. And none of us need that right now. But by simply switching your energy with Money Supermarket, you could save £280 on your bills. It's just one small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 1997, the MLB honors Jackie Robinson by retiring number 42 for all teams.
Today, I think every American should say a special word of thanks to Jackie Robinson and to Branch Rickey and to the members of the Dodger team who made him one of their own.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. The sports world is full of inspirational stories of heroic figures. It also has its fair share of shady characters. For detailed retellings of the darkest sagas in sports, explore TuneIn's documentary podcasts, like 30 for 30's The Sterling Affairs, about the scandalous life and times of the former Clippers owner, Donald Sterling, and Gladiator, which follows Aaron Hernandez's transformation from Super Bowl star to convicted murderer. For these and more, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The S&P 500 index retreating from a one-month high. All of its major groups dropping. Banks are slipping after earnings. Also, bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data. Right now, the S&P 500 index is down by 48 points. That is a drop of 1.7%. Dow Industrials down 331 points off the day's lows at the worst level. The Dow had been down 716, down 3%, but again now down by just about 1.4% on the Dow. Nasdaq down 70, that's a drop of 0.8%. 10-year up 1 4/32 with a yield of 0.63%. Gold down 0.3% now, $17.20 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil back above $20 a barrel, 2015 now up by 0.2%. Recapping equities lower across the board with the S&P down 50, down 1.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you on a Wednesday afternoon. And, you know, Carol, this story that we're about to talk about reminds me of a tweet that I saw go by, which basically said, governments, you had one job, which was essentially to get this right. A little bit glib, I take your point.
But it's a good point.
But it's a good point, and we are thinking a lot about governments these days. Alan Crawford has a great story in the upcoming edition of the magazine. It's online and on the Bloomberg Terminal today. He's an international government reporter joining us on the phone from Berlin, as is Joel Weber. He's the editor of Bloomberg Business Week. He's a little closer to us. He's on the phone from Brooklyn. So, Joel, I want to start with you because this really has put world leaders and both national, state, and local governments really in the spotlight here.
Yeah, of course it has. And how can it not, right? I mean, it's like, how's your government doing here? But I thought what Alan hit on was a really sort of unique angle, which is, you know, not all governments are actually failing or flailing at this. In fact, some are actually doing a really interesting job, and like there are lessons that we can learn from them. And of course, the one that stood out was Germany, where obviously Alan's based. Alan, what did you find? What's your angle here?
Well, what I find fascinating is that, of course, governments are to the fore as in this crisis, as you might imagine. But the governments that are, if you like, performing relatively well, better than others, are perhaps surprising. Places like South Korea, Singapore, Australia, and as you said, Germany, but also the US and the UK, relatively wealthy, well, extremely wealthy countries, seem to be suffering, and that now what I found fascinating is this idea that governments are not really being measured in the traditional metrics of, you know, the size of the economy, the size of the military. It's how many hospital beds they have, or how many intensive care unit beds they have. So that the whole, that raises questions about not just about the relative performance of governments now and whatever reckoning there may be down the road, but also what pressure may come on governments to perhaps look at different policy priorities once this crisis is over.
So, Alan, yeah, how likely is it that things, I mean, will they not have a choice but have to look at it? Because if you think about, we consistently talk about what kind of economy we ultimately have, and we're increasingly hearing that we're not going to have the type of activity that we were used to pre-virus. It may take a while. So is the government going to be forced to make some changes and change their priorities?
Of course, that's ultimately up to the electorates, but it's extremely hard to see governments in general, and in some countries in particular, like the United Kingdom, not facing huge pressure to invest more in the health service. Now, I don't pretend to understand the intricacies of the US healthcare system, but it's patently failing to perform the way it would be intended to, because the US it pays the most on healthcare. The government spends the most on healthcare of any country out of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and yet its cover for the population is the second worst of 36 countries. The only worst performer is Mexico. So those kind of metrics, I would suggest, are inevitably going to come into the public spotlight, and you would imagine that there will be pressure on governments right across the board to pay more attention, to invest more in healthcare and welfare. And of course, there's not a bottomless pit. They'll have to take that money from somewhere.
Well, Joel, I think it's fair to say that none of us on the phone here or on this line understand the intricacies of the U.S. healthcare system.
I was going to say, I was like, Alan took a pass on it, and I was like, I'm going to take a pass on that.
Exactly.
But, you know, Alan, I think the other thing that is really interesting in this is, like, a couple of the countries that you mentioned that have actually done, from a political standpoint of managing this crisis well, have been led by women, and you know, Merkel is you know, arguably doing it better than anybody. Can you bring us back to Germany, and like what should the U.S. learn from Germany in all of this?
Yeah, sure. I did kind of dodge that earlier. I was aware, but yes, Germany. It's been interesting to see, if you like, the return of Merkel. She's never been away, of course, but she's been in the backlight because there's been all of this, you know, political battle over her succession. She said that she will stand down next year at the latest. She intends to serve out her full term. But now she's really come back to the fore, and her presence as a crisis manager has really been shown. That she's very calm, she's measured, she is, of course, unlike most political leaders, she's a scientist, she's a physicist by training, which of course is rather convenient in a crisis where, again, experts are coming to the fore. Again, they were ridiculed famously in the UK that, you know, the time of experts was over. Merkel is the epitome of an expert when it comes to a political leader. She does manage to give this reassuring tone to the German public, but also just the very fact she's been in office for so long. I mean, she's been there for more than 14 years in power. She's been through the financial crisis, the subsequent crises all the way through. She she has this gravitas, and that reassures the public.
Well, leave it to a woman is all I'm going to say, because we seem to get things done. What's
really teed you up for that one there, Master.
Yeah, I'll wait for the tweets to come at me. You know, what's interesting too, Alan, and we've just got about a minute left here. You talk about Germany, and, they've got a social market economy. It's different from our market economy in the U.S., and maybe that's, in other developed parts of the world. I mean, maybe that's what we need. I don't know.
Yeah, it's again that there's this role of the state in public enterprise. You see it, for example, Labour representatives sit on the board of big companies like Volkswagen, but specifically here, they have a system of state subsidies for workers so that companies furlough workers rather than lay them off, and so that helps reduce unemployment. And so that's it's a big asset of the system that perhaps other governments could learn from, and indeed are learning from.
Right. Well, lots of lessons to be learned for sure. Really smart story. Thank you so much, Alan Crawford, international government reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from Berlin, where there are a lot of lessons to be learned. Chancellor Merkel, wow.
As I just said to you on the IV, I love those strong European women.
I know, exactly.
All right.
You have your heritage. All right, one quick headline, JCPenney not making its $12 million interest payment payable on April 15th.
Now, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to be right back. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
News without...
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
country. Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
For
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Wednesday, April 15th. Stocks lower across the board. Do want to begin with that earlier headline about retailer JCPenney. Says it won't be making a $12 million interest payment due and payable today. Virus-related store closures have disrupted its turnaround plans. Same-store sales down 7% year over year. Sales are expected to fall again in the first quarter, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. Neil Kashkari, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, says it's going to be a slow reopening for the U.S. economy and, quote, we're in for a long, bumpy road until there is a vaccine. Federal Reserve out today with its latest report card on America's economy. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
It's another deep sigh. The Regional Economic Survey echoes other data, a sharp and sudden stop in each of the Fed's districts stemming from the coronavirus outbreak. Unemployment up, the outlook uncertain. Information for the Fed's report was collected through the first week of April. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Lots of bank earnings today. Goldman Sachs has Wall Street's biggest investment portfolio, a boast that became a liability in the first quarter as fallout from the coronavirus weighed on the firm's holdings. Goldman Sachs shares, though, they're up today by 1.5%. Also reporting earnings this morning, Bank of America followed two big rivals, J.P. Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, in setting aside billions of dollars for loans likely to sour amid an almost total U.S. economic shutdown. Shares of Bank of America trading lower now by 5.4%. Citigroup also reported this morning its shares lower now by just about 3.7%. U.S. airlines did reach preliminary deals to access billions of dollars in federal aid, securing a temporary lifeline as the industry waits for customers to start flying again. But the airline's mixed picture, UAL is up 2.9%, American up 3.3%, Delta on the minus side down 1.1%, Southwest ticker LUV, it is down by 4.2%. 10-year, the yield there 0.63%, gold down 0.4%, recapping on equities, S&P down 44, a drop right now of 1.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's do a little Business Week economics here if we can. So much data and so much tough data to look at today. Before we get to that, let's get to California Governor Gavin Newsom. He's got today's update.
And again, our deep condolences to those family members, loved ones of those lives lost over the last 24 hours. I began yesterday's press conference by making a point that yesterday we had the highest total number of deaths since this disease began here in the state of California, 71 deaths yesterday. Today we recorded 63 deaths, some 821 families, again, every number, not a statistic, but a life being torn asunder. And I just want to extend my heartfelt condolences and also extend appreciation for not only those loved ones and the families impacted, but I had the privilege yesterday of talking to over 150 faith leaders from every conceivable part of this state. And one common thread was how one deals with grief at this time, particularly the loss of a life, and how one organizes funeral services and all the logistical challenges that in the best of the times are difficult, but at this moment are made even more challenging. And so, again, I just felt important to begin by recognizing the totality of the crisis that's still at hand, not only here in the state of California, but all throughout the nation. Our numbers yesterday were the highest recorded, but so were the nation's. And so by no stretch of the imagination are we out of the woods, despite the fact that we put forward a framework yesterday to begin to consider the prospects of reopening certain sectors of our economy. I want folks to know we need to maintain our vigilance, and we need to maintain the path that we are on, a path that is producing results. But again, we are not yet in a place where we need to be so that we could start reopening. That said, people are not where they were just a few weeks ago as it relates to unemployment claims. Just in the last 4 weeks, 2.7 million Californians have formally filed for unemployment insurance. We are in the process right now of dealing with an unprecedented number of people making phone calls into our EDD department, our Employment Development Department. We're trying to process these applications, and we're trying to turn around those applications in real time. We're doing so not only for employees, but independent contractors, for small business men and women, people that are self-employed. And I want to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But I want to first just begin by saying this. I just signed an executive order that will extend our call center so that we can meet the volumes of inquiry. We'll extend it from the hours of 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, 7 days a week. A few days back, I commented that the EDD department had a call center since 2013 that was operating from 8 a.m. to noon, just 5 days a week. That was when we had record low unemployment. And just like that, now 2.7 million people claiming now the need for unemployment insurance in just over 1 month. So now record number of call volumes. I want to just thank our partners, particularly at SEIU 1000 and the incredible workforce that has been redeployed to meet that demand. 740 individuals within EDD have repositioned themselves, gotten trained, and are now redeployed in a position to address the call volume, but moreover, to be able to answer those calls and give you quality information. 600 additional state employees are being redeployed between now and Monday to do the same. So in total, 1,340 individuals now will be redirected and will start the process of helping you process your earned benefits. And so I just want to applaud Julie Sue, who will speak in a moment, her Department of Labor, and the incredible partnership that she has formed within her agency, and all the men and women that went and did above and beyond work just on Easter as a proof point and specific example. We thought it was appropriate, considering the burnout and the volume, that we gave people a little time off on Easter Sunday. 500 of those state employees refused that time off because they cared more about you than they did themselves. And so while many of us may have spent time with our families, they did not. And in turn, they were able to process a couple 100,000 distributions just on Easter Sunday to help people most in need in the state of California. So if you ever have any doubt about the value of public employees, I hope you'll consider just that example. Rather than stepping aside, they stepped in and they took the time to consider other people first, not just themselves. When they deserved that time off, they didn't take that time off. And so I just want to applaud all of those that did heroic work on Easter Sunday and continue to do heroic work every single day to process what looks like 1 million or so payments now a week. Those numbers we hope will get even higher rather, in the next few weeks. But that's the current processing, a couple 100,000 checks on a day that we're able to turn around through these efforts and other efforts that have been put into place at EDD. So that's an update specifically on unemployment insurance. And by the way, those checks are retroactive in many cases, particularly as it relates to the $600 per week additional check that are being received from the federal government stimulus support. And so people should look forward to getting those checks. By the way, they're not really checks, they're debit cards in the mail, and see those debit cards transferred into their possession in very short order. As I said, there's 1.5 million that are self-employed, 1.5 million small business men and women, individuals that have no other employees that are also deserving of direct assistance. The federal government created a program called PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. That PUA program we are now setting up in the state of California. And we're doing so in a very methodical and thoughtful way. Instead of just putting out applications and having people wait weeks and weeks and weeks, for eligibility and for notification around the distribution of payments. We are organizing a very deliberative process in real time to set up our PUA system in a way where we can turn around checks within 24 to 48 hours. I'll ask Julie Sue to come up in a moment and talk a little bit more specifically about that. But I want to make this point about the PUA process. This is not a way to avoid misclassification. The state of California prides itself on being a national leader as it relates to protecting our workers from misclassification. And it is not a way of protecting those in platform economy, the gig economy, from not providing wage data to the state of California. They must provide that wage data for the state of California. If we were in receipt of that data, we would use the traditional lines of unemployment insurance, but not all of those employers are paying into the unemployment insurance process, and that's indeed why the state of California advanced what is well known within the state, a decision where we codified through AB 5, a bill that I signed, the Dynamax decision on relationship to this issue, where the state Supreme Court unanimously adjudicated in favor of addressing these misclassifications. So I just want folks to know that their status, even if they choose the PUA process, is not at peril in terms of their benefits and the ultimate determination of their classification. I just want to make that crystal clear, nor does it push us backwards in terms of advancing the cause of righting those wrongs and continuing to transition in implementation of AB 5 itself. Again, I'll ask Julie Sue in just 1 second to talk more about that as well. One final thing. I'm a fan of employment insurance. And this is something, when I was a former mayor of San Francisco during the Great Recession, we were able to work with Speaker Nancy Pelosi to get a pilot through the federal appropriations to put together an employment insurance, not just an unemployment insurance program. It's commonly referred to across the country as a work share program. The state of California has a modest work share program. We want to advance that program. We want to expand it significantly, get more employers into that program. I signed an executive order on that as well today to significantly increase the time to application, the time to the creation and development of those programs. And I don't want to moralize this. I don't want to get into a national frame right now, but I can just say this. I think one of the most significant things we can do in the United States of America is reimagine our unemployment system and do more of what you're seeing in countries like Germany and elsewhere doing, and that's provide the employment insurance so people can stay in their status, their benefits included, even with reduced hours in an economy, even as acute and challenging as ours today. The federal government did a version of this in the CARES Act as relates to that Paycheck Protection Program. It's a variant, but I think the opportunity to do this at scale avails itself, certainly in a national frame, but also to begin anew to think about how we can scale that program, our work share program, in the state of California. So that was the purpose of the executive order. Extend those hours 8 to 8 starting Monday, extend our ability to process even more checks, encourage people to fill out the unemployment insurance forms, let self-employed individual contractors know of the availability now of our PUA program, and let folks know that that status as it relates to that determination of your classification as an employer or an independent contractor will not be impacted by the creation of that program. With that, let me ask Julie Sue to come in and fill in some of the blanks.
All right, you've been listening to California Governor Gavin Newsom give an update. And Carol, you tweeted out a figure that he put out toward the beginning of that presentation. 2.7 million Californians have filed for unemployment.
That's one state.
One state. It's a big one,
state. Yeah.
But still one state.
But still, it's one state, and so they are looking to process all those claims. And, really, hats off to those, employees who are like, I'm not going to take time off. I know we're working a lot, but we're going to do this. That's a big number. And that's why when we talk about what kind of recovery we get a little bit nervous about what happens on the other side, because how quickly do all those workers, are they brought back? And that leads us to where we need to go. Let's talk a little bit of Business Week economics. With us is Carl Riccadonna, Chief U.S. Economist at Bloomberg Economics, on the phone from New Jersey. So, Carl, we also did get the Fed Beige Book. This is going to be crucial in terms of what the Fed's going to be talking about at that next meeting of policymakers. But, man, you know, the data that continues to come out from states, it's pretty dramatic.
Absolutely, Carol. Good afternoon. What's interesting, going back to those California unemployment claim filings, if we look at unemployment filings as a share of the labor force, California is not leading the pack by any stretch. So the claims that they have filed, and those are large numbers you talked about in the story, they're about 11% of the labor share in California. And we can see a lot of other states that are actually leading that. Michigan's at 17%, they're front of the pack. Pennsylvania, 16%. So that does imply there's some significant catch-up for some of these states that are very large states that have been a little bit slower to process claims. That's why tomorrow morning my team is looking for an additional 6 million unemployment claims to be filed. That will push the total up to 20 million. That tells us the April unemployment rate is going to be in the vicinity of about 15%, if not higher.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Wow. Holy schmolies, as Carol Master might say. All right, Kathleen Hayes also with us, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from the Poconos. So given what we just heard from Carl, also given the Beige Book, what did you see that jumped out at you the most today, Kathleen?
Oh, God. Well, you know, the retail sales, the industrial production, the survey for manufacturing in New York State, the Empire State that the New York Fed puts out, the home builder sentiment survey. Look at the bond market. Now, we know stocks are a little weaker today, but people who have not bought into the stock market rally have been saying for the past few weeks, since it bottomed, since it technically entered a bull market, wait. When people start seeing how really bad the economy's been hit, that stock market rally will be vulnerable, and you may see another move down. So what you're seeing in bonds today. Look at the 30-year bond, you guys. The yield's down to 1.27. It is up 3.5 points in its price. The 10-year at 0.63, up, a point and an eighth.
There was, and that's a really good point, Kathleen. There was a very dramatic move in the Treasury market today, where everybody talks a lot about the equity markets, but man, what went on in the bond market was huge today.
But, I think all you have to do is look at the headline on the story that came out from our eco team this morning. After retail sales, after industrial production dropped the most since 1946, says U.S. economic data show deep hit in March, collapse in April. Do you know what I mean? It's like these surveys suggest that people have pulled back tremendously. It underscores what Carl said. This also showed up in the Beige Book, where Philadelphia said, no sector was spared. Every district of the 12 Fed district banks, they saw losses in jobs. That's underscored by what you guys just said. But this is what people, again, this is what the more bearish people or the skeptics of the stock market rally have been talking about. When these negative data hit, it's going to be really tough to keep buying stocks.
Right. Well,
and to Kathleen's point, the retail sales numbers were actually misleading because while it was the worst report on record, we saw an 8.7% decline. The Census Bureau indicated that a lot of responses didn't come through. So presumably the weakest responses or the weakest retailers didn't have the time or staff to actually submit answers, and the seasonal adjustment factor was a very, very generous seasonal adjustment, which means that if we treated it the way we ordinarily do in the month of March, it wouldn't have been an 8.7% decline. It would have been a 15% decline. And so there was some statistical massage in the details of that report, and that just tells you what is coming in the second quarter.
Did you say 16%?
15%.
Oh, yeah, that's much better.
It was very transparent about this, though. Very transparent that they made the seasonal adjustment. And even in their very wonky, eco way of saying it, which, of course, Carl can just read and breeze through, everybody else sort of scratches their head. You can tell they're saying, look, you guys, this is not a normal month. This is not a normal time. And if we look at the general yearly trends, there's no yearly trend that looks like this, so they had to make some adjustments. But it also goes to show that on so many of these forecasts, come on, pick a number on the wall, throw your dart, and see if you're right. It is almost impossible, I would think, for people to forecast in any kind of really, deep way.
Well, as Governor Andrew Cuomo said earlier on his update about the virus, he's like, there's nothing normal. Like, however you look at this, we're not going to go back to normal life as we knew it and expected to. Everything has changed, and we certainly are seeing it in these numbers today. Guys, thank you so much. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor at Bloomberg News, on the phone from the Poconos. I still want to ask her if she's got a heart-shaped tub, but we'll have to get to that next time around.
Next time.
Carl Riccadonna,
Next time or never.
Chief U.S. economist at Bloomberg Economics, on the phone from New Jersey. I hope people get that joke. Do you think they get that joke?
I don't know. I think only people of a certain age. Just a couple headlines crossing Bloomberg right now. U.S. weighing oil output cut by paying drillers not to produce. So basically, keep the oil in the ground. We'll pay you anyway. The federal government weighing doing that. And also, speaking of data, sobering data, New York, the state reporting 213,779 virus cases. That is up from 202,208.
When does the government run out of money? And this speaks to a story that's on the Bloomberg. Maybe I'll tweet it out, but just has the value of money kind of, is it different nowadays? Yeah. Does it really mean anything anymore? Because we just keep, thinking about various stimulus programs. All right, let's get back for a check on top business stories and a check on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, Carol Messer. Do want to begin with the oil headline that Jason just mentioned, seeing a pop in crude here. West Texas Intermediate now up by 0.9%, up 19 cents a barrel, $20.32 on WTI. Gold up down 0.4% right now, lower by $7 the ounce at $17.20. The 10-year, we were just talking about that, up 1 3/32, now at 0.63%. Stocks are slumping. Treasury surging as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data add to concern over a severe global recession. S&P is down 51, a drop of 1.8%. The Dow is down 361, down 1.5%. NASDAQ down 76, a drop there of 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you on a Wednesday afternoon. Let's head down to Atlanta now. Margaret Newkirk is there, national reporter for Bloomberg. And the world of politics, it's still out there. And it's getting more complicated. And it's still a presidential election year, Carol. So let's get into that.
Checking all the boxes there,
Checking
Jason
all the
Kelly.
boxes. Margaret, great to talk to you. How are things down in Atlanta?
We're picking up with our COVID cases. Yeah. We're not like New York, though.
Right. Well, you've had, speaking of politics, I've talked about this probably more on the show than people want me to, but you've had a governor who has been hesitant to employ as much of the stay at home and probably some tension, I think, between some of the local governments and the state governments. Is that fair?
That is fair. He has now done a stay-at-home order, but he was one of the last governors to do it, if not the last.
Yeah.
No, there's still some that haven't, but of those who have done it, he was the last.
Right. Georgia and Florida were sort of the down there were some of the last to do it, and I know that Atlanta obviously is dealing with this in a different way. On the national scale, mail-in voting, it is top of mind for a lot of folks, including the president. Given this is a presidential election year, what are we seeing? Because R's and D's taking up their positions here.
Well, the R's are taking up the position that they don't want it, or they want it to be not easy. And that's what we're seeing in some of the states. Trump has made himself pretty clear since about 2 weeks ago. He's been coming out saying it's rife with fraud and things like that. And Democrats have always been for the wider access. It all sort of came to a head in Wisconsin. Was that just last week? The vote
just last week. I know. It seems like a month ago, but it was just last week.
We do that all the time. It's only Wednesday, Margaret.
But we're seeing in Georgia, the Secretary of State did mail out absentee ballot applications, but not to everybody. he left out newly registered voters and people who haven't voted in a while. In Ohio, Democrats wanted the same kind of thing, but Republicans agreed only to send out a postcard telling you how to absentee vote. I think there's a fight going on in Texas related to what counts as an excuse in a state where you still have to have an excuse to absentee vote. But the fact of the matter is there's going to be a lot of mail-in voting in November regardless. And so the question is, how difficult will they make it?
Is it, okay, so help me out here. So is it up to the states to figure this out? Is it the federal government?
I think it's up to the states.
Okay.
That's a good question. But I think that what the federal government, where they come in, is whether they're going to provide some money to help the states do what will essentially be an unprecedented kind of election. They've had mail-in votings where they mail people ballots in places like Colorado and Washington State. But this is where they're mailing out the applications, and then the applications go to the ballots. And it's just going to be very complicated. It's going to overwhelm probably some smaller rural counties that might be going for Trump.
This is where I wonder if Silicon Valley, I mean, God, here we are, we know Silicon Valley's been in a war basically with the government. Although, right, but I do wonder, Jason, I think about the conversations we've had, Silicon Valley can move quickly, they collaborate, they coordinate, and could come up with an app that could be possible for us to vote. Am I being too simplistic? And I understand you got to make it secure and all that good stuff, but man, wouldn't that be great?
It would. There are a lot of concerns about internet voting, just for the possibility of interference of hacking. But other than that, yes, it would be very simple.
Yeah,
people could stay home and vote, and you wouldn't.
And Margaret, do you have a sense of how soon all of this needs to be decided? Because November seems like a long time away, except it's not really, and we know that these systems take a long time to get put in place. Like, when is the sort of go no go decision need to be made by a lot of these states?
I actually don't have a sense of that. I would think they would have to have something in place by, at the very least, like late summer.
Right.
But that's just an educated guess on my part. But
all right.
Most of the states have some ability to mail in ballots. They just have never done it on the kind of volume that's expected.
Right.
Or if you look at Wisconsin, they had more mail-in ballots actually cast than the 2012 presidential primary total vote.
Right?
Wow.
No, it's pretty amazing. I mean, Wisconsin certainly was the wake-up call, as you point out. All right, thank you so much, Margaret Newkirk, joining us on the phone from Atlanta, national reporter there, tracking something that, Carol, is going to be a massive issue. Certainly.
Oh my God. Right?
Especially given how much we have already started to hear about it from both sides. I believe, and Margaret pointed that out rightly, that the president has come out and said that he, considers it something where there is a lot of fraud that is potentially at risk. Of course, we should point out, and this is not a secret or editorializing, the president did vote by mail himself in the recent Florida primary. So, clearly there are a lot of forces at work here. And, it is a reminder that the virus and the response affects every single aspect of our lives, and also a reminder that there is a presidential election. Yesterday was a big day in terms of former Vice President Joe Biden getting the endorsement of his former boss and former running mate, former President Barack Obama. Obviously, Bernie Sanders has endorsed him. I saw a pretty enthusiastic tweet from Elizabeth Warren, former rival today.
It's the Democrats realizing, David Weston had some great guests on Bloomberg Radio on Balance of Power earlier. But, this whole idea of, Barack Obama is still the leader of the Democratic Party. That's who everybody looks to, right? So this was a big endorsement. But at some point, especially with Joe Biden handicapped in not being able to go out on the campaign trail and meet with voters and campaign, that the Democratic Party has to really get together behind their candidate and try and get as much momentum as they can going into November, because they're not going to be able to do it in the normal way. Like, we don't even know, right, with the conventions, right, how that is going to play out. So you've got to start picking up, be together behind one candidate and then create the momentum going forward. So, yeah, I don't know where we're going to be in November. I mean, we're hearing increasingly some of the governors talk about, the summer in terms of group gatherings. Forget it.
Right.
People starting to think about, okay, maybe fall we start to get a little bit more normal, perhaps. But man, this could go on much longer than we realize. And, we'll have to see how the elections are ultimately impacted as a result.
Well, exactly. And, when you saw some of the pictures, I'm sure you did as well from Wisconsin, and, what does social distancing at the polls look like? And, we're talking about November when in parts of the country it's not exactly great weather. It's a little bit cold outside, so what does that look like?
It's like merging, the lights where you're like told, you have to wait till the light turns and then you can merge. I mean, that's what it becomes. That becomes our society, basically.
All right, let's get a check on the trading day and those business headlines. Charlie Pellet has it all. Hey, Charlie.
Thank you very much. Well, here's what's going on. We've got 30 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Jason Kelly with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all lower. Do want to begin with crude oil. Repeating an earlier story, the Trump administration is considering paying American oil producers to leave crude in the ground to help alleviate a glut that has caused prices to plummet and push some drillers into bankruptcy. Right now, West Texas Intermediate crude up 1%, up 21 cents a barrel, 2032. Developing story. Again, we've got crude up now by 1%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all slumping. Treasury surging as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data adds to concern over a severe global recession. S&P up 60 points, down 60 points. That is a drop of 2.1%. The Dow is down 433 points, down 1.8%. NASDAQ down 101, a drop there of 1.2%. And again, just to clarify and confirm, S&P is down 60 points, a drop there of 2.1%. 10-year up 1 8/30 seconds with a yield now of 0.62%, and crude worth repeating up now by just about 1%. Well, one of the questions that investors have is when might we see any sort of a vaccine? And we put that question this morning to Lauren Sauer, Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
There's a lot of really good candidates coming up right now. I think we're seeing estimates from those scientists somewhere between 3 and 12 months, which is unbelievable for vaccine science. It's really fast. And so it's exciting to see all this progress being made. I think realistically, a vaccine that's ready to go out to the general public is about a year away. But we could start seeing candidates that could be used to protect our frontline health workers and first responders earlier, probably.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Retail sales posted a record drop in March. We are seeing a lot of retailers slumping today. Among them, Macy's, for example, plunging 7.2%. Target down 2.1%. Kohl's lower now by 7.4%. Again, recapping equities lower with the S&P down 61, a drop there of 2.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
I remember being in London.
Quick flex.
Quick flex. And Boy George was at the table next to me without his makeup. Without his makeup.
Wow.
Without his do. So he looked.
How'd you know
different.
It was him?
Because he looks like him.
Yeah.
He's also on the Housewives of Beverly Hills. He's one of the housewives'
one
buddies.
Of the husbands?
One of the husbands. He works for one of the husbands. I guess he's like a record promoter.
Okay.
Yeah, or he's like a promoter or something and stuff. So anyway.
Wow.
Boy George, Culture Club.
Culture Club. Yeah.
God, great band. Dave Wilson. Sorry.
We're just going to reminisce here, Dave Wilson, for a little while about Carol jetting off to London and, dining with Boy George as one does. How does this relate to your chart of the day?
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. It was the producer, Paul Brennan, who came up with this one, and it relates to actually the headline I put on the chart talking about the S&P 500 tumbling relative to treasuries. It was a chart that I saw earlier this week in a report from Tally Legere, who's a senior investment strategist at Invesco US. And what he did, and I hadn't seen this done anywhere else, was take the S&P 500 and divide it by the reciprocal of the 10-year Treasury yield. Now, that sounds more complicated than it needs to. If you assume the 10-year has a yield of 1%, then you would be 100. That, if it was 2%, it would be 50, and so on and so forth. Anyway, what it shows you, this calculation, is that, within the last few weeks, we've been at the lowest ratio for stocks relative to bonds since 1983, which happens to be the same year that I'll Tumble For You, the Culture Club song, came out as a single.
Oh, my gosh. It
So
just all
there you
comes
go.
together.
It tumbled 85% from a high in October 2018. I mean, it's bounced off that low at this point. It got, as bad as it was going to get at the beginning of April. So, but the way Leger feels, at least what he wrote about it, is that you got to see more than that for stocks to really have any kind of ability to recover here. It's that relative value comparison, and there's no doubt that stocks have just suffered as bonds have done really well, and so this is a way to kind of capture that. Not to mention to put a little Culture Club on the radio. In any case, if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
I'm just
It does make me feel better, and also totally checks out that Paul Brennan would pick that and be like, oh, these two idiots are going to love this. Getting a little Culture Club on the show.
Well, all right. So wait, now I've got a challenge for you, Dave. First of all, great chart, because I feel like it plays to what we were talking about with Kathleen Hayes about what the bond market's seeing. And I have to say, right now, I'm going to put my bets on the bond market in terms of what the outlook looks like versus some of the enthusiasm we've seen in stocks. Sorry, stock market, but that's what I'm going to do. My challenge to you, David Wilson, Karma Chameleon, if you can, if you can use that for a chart, I would really love to see that in the future.
Karma Chameleon.
Karma Chameleon. That's Boy George.
Yes,
He knows
I
this.
know.
Oh,
I know
okay.
the song.
Well, you said-
who do you
you're
think
just
you're
trying to
talking
contemplate. Well, you said it
What do
like-
you do with that?
You said, I don't know. Chameleon changing, like something
That's the
changing
challenge.
its colors
That's the
or
challenge.
something.
It's not a challenge if it's easy, Dave.
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly.
Come on. You're a next level
But,
guy when it comes to
the
music
thing
and
is,
charts.
it's sort of missing the point because, I come up with charts and then I come up with song ideas, not the other way around.
Well, see, but now, okay, so now you've got a song. Find a chart to fit. Wouldn't that be cool? Come on. I'm just saying. This is not normal
take
times,
it under
David
advisement,
Wilson.
Carol.
Not normal times, David Wilson.
No, definitely not.
All right, Dave Wilson, we will check in with you in just a little while after the close of trading for your stock of the day. And I was going to say we promise not to be quite so goofy, but I can't make that promise.
That takes me back, man. Right? Culture Club?
Well, you know what it is? I'm excited. You know who would like the T-shirt that I'm wearing right now? Dave Wilson.
He would love it. It's a great folks.
Support local radio.
Yeah, support local radio. Go to Twitter. If you're not on, create a Twitter account. You should check this out because, man, it's a really cool T-shirt. I made Jason stand up and model it for me on Nexi so that I could see that he was really wearing it. But it's great.
So
right?
is there a picture of it on Twitter I can check out?
There is, yeah. It's
Don't
from.
you follow him, Dave Wilson?
You probably know this radio station, Dave. It's WRLT in Nashville, Lightning 100. Do you know this?
Can't say I do, but I haven't spent a lot of time in Nashville over the years. Been there, just haven't spent much time.
Well, you should check out their website because it's your jam. It's all about
What's
your
the
jam.
website? What's the website?
I think it's lightning100.com.
Oh, I'll check it out too.
I did tag him in the tweet.
Dave,
and,
don't you follow Jason Kelly?
Oh, I look in on his stuff now.
Thing. God, a lot of things are coming out in this segment. We're learning a lot about each other. I like it.
This is our own therapy moment, which is a good thing. Everybody should take a moment to do
well, and I will say, I mean, this is, when you think about, I mean, not to get too serious, but I mean, when you think about the different businesses that are being affected, I mean, this was actually a fundraiser that was flagged by the incredible songwriter that I know Dave knows, Jason Isbell, based down in Nashville, former drive-by trucker, now Grammy-winning solo artist. He is very active on Twitter. He tweeted out this fundraiser that WRLT was doing basically to raise some money to keep broadcasting.
That's great.
Because at a time when a lot of businesses are suffering, they're obviously not able to bring in revenue from concerts and things like that. So
Lightning100.com.
A cause worth supporting. So
and I double-checked. I do follow Jason on Twitter, by the way. It's just that I hadn't caught up to his latest posts.
There you go.
Dave Wilson, you of course follow me, right?
Of course.
Everyone follows you.
I follow you, Dave.
As my boys would say, you're
the weekends,
you're
Carol.
varied.
Are you kidding me?
I know, I'm a little obsessed.
Yeah, a little bit. We haven't seen a lot of Scout lately. In any case, all right, folks, coming up, we are going to get to the drive to the close.
Yes.
First, let's get back to Bob Moon. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
That wasn't Dave Wilson gaslighting, was it? Government relief checks are starting to arrive in Americans' bank accounts as the economic damage from the coronavirus piles up. American industrial output tanked in March, registering its biggest decline since the U.S. demobilized at the end of World War II. And retail sales fell by an unheard of 8.7%, with April expected to be far worse. A leading economist says there are lessons to be learned in all this. Here's Bloomberg's Irv Chapman.
The capacity of government agencies to do their job, from computers to human capital, has proved inadequate, Professor Joseph Stiglitz of Columbia University said in a Bloomberg interview.
In a time of crisis, we turn to government. For the last 40 years, we've undermined the state capacity to respond, particularly to crises. You couldn't describe a worse behavior in terms of preparation for this kind of crisis.
Stiglitz cited the superior ability of European countries to cushion unemployment, as well as their inability to work out a common economic strategy. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Elizabeth Warren endorsed Joe Biden today, becoming the final major 2020 Democratic presidential hopeful to back the party's presumptive nominee.
Joe Biden has spent nearly his entire life in public service. He knows that a government run with integrity, competence, and heart will save lives and save livelihoods. And we can't afford to let Donald Trump continue to endanger the lives and livelihoods of every American.
The announcement from the Massachusetts senator comes the same week the Biden campaign rolled out two other big-ticket endorsements, Sanders and former President Barack Obama. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you interested in a challenging...
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix or stream wherever good music lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Because you can't watch Trolls World Tour at the cinema, Sky Store is bringing the cinema home to you with Sky Store Premiere.
I'm going to destroy all music, except for rock!
We need to unite the trolls to save all music.
Our brand new service that lets you watch movies at home that would normally be in the cinema.
Rock and roll! Let's go save the world! Yes!
Prepare for battle. This ought to be good. Enjoy Trolls World Tour now on Sky Store Premiere, bringing the cinema to you.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are slumping, treasuries surging as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data add to concern over a severe global recession. S&P 500 index pulling back from a one-month high, down 59 points right now, dropping 2.1%, 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. The Dow is down 440. That is a drop of 1.8%. NASDAQ down 104, a drop now of 1.2%. 10-year up 1 7/30 with the yield of 0.62%. Gold is down 3.2%, down 0.3% right now, 17.21 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude now rallying 1.5%, up 31 cents a barrel at 20.42. Crude surging on word that drillers may be paid in the U.S. to keep their oil in the ground. Recapping stocks lower with the S&P down 2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
You try singing friends.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
So I'm so excited to bring in our next guest. It is time for the drive to the close. Back with us is a friend of the show, Hillary Kramer, President and Chief Investment Officer at A&G Capital Research, author of Game Changer Investing, How to Profit from Tomorrow's Billion-Dollar Trends. And while she usually joins us back in our Interactive Broker studio, she's on the phone in Denver as we all are sheltering in place. Nice to have you here. Are you doing okay? Your family's okay, Hillary?
Thank you for asking, Carol. We're all very healthy and very thankful for that.
All right.
What's it look like out in Denver and in Colorado? You know, we're always asking people, Hillary, especially when folks are outside the tri-state area, what it's looking like on the ground, because, you know, we, as you know, being a creature of Manhattan, can get a little myopic here, especially in this day and age. What does it feel like and look like in Denver?
Very quiet. Streets are empty, but it doesn't seem to be that sense of fear here, because Denver and Colorado just hasn't been hit the way New York, parts of the West Coast have just been struggling, Michigan. And there's just a really upbeat attitude. And Denver itself is a very young city.
Right.
Now, I understand it's completely different in Vail, for example, which has tried to make sure that no Airbnbs can operate, basically keeping out all of those that want to escape and go into a place like that when there really isn't the health care available. There just aren't the hospital beds if that particular demographic, where it's a second home or a vacation place to go and hide, they don't have the ability. And that's a big problem in a lot of places.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're glad you're safe, and it's good to get some perspective of what's happening around the country. Jason and I have been checking in with folks as we talk from different states just to get an idea of how things are going. I am also curious, how things are going from an investment perspective and what you're hearing from clients. I mean, we always talk names with you, and we're going to get into that. But I'm just curious: are your clients, are they nervous? What do they want to be doing in this environment? What do you think they should be doing in this environment?
There isn't a lot of nervousness, which is actually very interesting. You'd think that there would be so much fear, but I think that there's a sense that this, now, where are we, $7 trillion that's being injected into the economy, the market, especially the fact that the Fed will step in and buy junk bonds, for example. It just has given everybody a sense that this is okay. I mean, even though you have companies today like JCPenney, JCP, that are on its last days, before filing, there just isn't that same concern. Also, look at the way we bounced back since March 23rd. You look at some of these companies and you realize that the market, Wall Street, as a group, we see that it's going to be much improved. That second half of the year, there's so much optimism around it. The big question is what happens with earnings. Now, in terms of the banks, I just have to say the reason the banks aren't down, the reason that Goldman Sachs, ended up being, up on the day, has to do with the fact that, companies like Citigroup, for example, suddenly taking $7 billion in the provisions in case they have losses in the future, instead of $4 billion as expected. A lot of it is trying to soften the blow, and there's going to be a lot of financial, I'll just call it manufacturing, that's going to take place. And I'm not talking about anything that's even, on the margin. That's what banks can do. They can take these big loss provisions and then wait for there to be a quarter where it really is bad. So, we're seeing that. But I think that everyone needs to realize it's not like it's going to be all up from here, even though we could certainly end the year on a positive. The market and stocks could certainly be up. But there are nice pockets of stocks that are still an opportunity. And I have to mention, all these times I have been in the last year, Chewy. You know how many times
you love you some Chewy.
Okay. So on March 12th, it was $22, and Chewy is hovering there at $44. And that's an online pet food, pet nutraceutical vaccine company. It's basically the Amazon for pet foods.
So
pet
that's
water.
obviously in part just because people are shopping online, but also even in the midst of economic crisis, Spot's going to get fed, right?
Absolutely, and Spot's going to get a lot of attention, just like a lot of children are getting a lot of attention. Yeah. The whole world has completely changed. I think a lot of people didn't realize a lot of those that were outside of the home working, like me, had no idea how difficult it was how we hadn't trained our children. So there's a lot going on culturally in this.
Well, we've talked about the stories of people adopting dogs before, before getting ready to be, living at home, working at home. We saw that happening certainly in the New York metro area. I didn't realize this. Chewy shares are up 51% this year. And it's interesting, as I do walk my dog, Scout, around the neighborhood. I did have a Dalmatian, by the way, named Spot. I'm just going to tell you,
This all checks out. This all checks out.
I had 3 Dalmatians, actually. But what's interesting is we walk around the neighborhood, and I look just kind of when people are throwing out garbage, there are, from the various dog online services, you see them, the boxes. So people are definitely buying goods online. That's one of the things that's priority. You got to talk to us about Amazon because it hit another record. Go figure. What's your take here? I mean, we all are dependent on Amazon more than before, I feel like, more than ever before.
Right. And of course, with Amazon announcing, all of the hiring that they have done and that they will be doing, it's certainly changed the environment and the expectation around Amazon. But we have to keep in mind that most of the revenue of Amazon and the growth happens from AWS, right? The web services. And we could see a bit of a slowdown there. And so analysts really haven't been digging into the numbers. It's more like the hedge fund buy side that has these knee-jerk reactions. And certainly that's why we're seeing Amazon just continue to rise. Not that it's not an excellent company to own, but there's so many stocks that have been so beaten down that it makes more sense to step into those than that's really what it comes down to. They're still better off with Shopify, and Chewy might have some more room there. And I love PayPal. I think PayPal owning Venmo.
I've used PayPal. I've been using PayPal.
A ton. Right? All right, we're going to leave it there.
Stay safe.
Always love catching up with you. Hillary Kramer, author of Game Changer Investing, How to Profit from Tomorrow's Billion-Dollar Trends. That's your quarantine read recommendation of the day. This is Bloomberg.
Leaders are born.
What is it? There are 2 sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip 3, have a game night. In fact, why not make it a game day? Whether you're quarantined with kids or roommates, nothing passes the time like a game of cards, Pictionary, charades, dominoes, or Never Have I Ever. If you've got the hardware, break out the video game console and enjoy hours of guilt-free gaming. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen From Home on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
The close.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it. Losing Wednesday on Wall Street. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declining. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. He's all alone there. Gregory Crane, Director of Security, ringing that closing bell. Stock slump, Treasury surged as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data added to concern over a severe global recession. S&P 500 index retreating from a one-month higher, did pair losses mid-afternoon amid gains in healthcare equipment companies. Financial shares slumped, though, after earnings this morning from Goldman Sachs, among others. Walter Todd is Chief Investment Officer at Greenwood Capital, and on Bloomberg Television this morning, he was asked if he would be adding to his positions in both Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase.
I think it's important to recognize with these companies and the market overall that we've seen quite a move over the past 2 weeks. Bank of America, for example, is up about 35% off the lows. So I think you can still be patient with these stocks and with the market overall.
And Bank of America did drop today by 6.4%. Goldman Sachs advanced 0.2%. Again, Bank of America down 6.4%. Citigroup also reported earnings this morning, and we did see Citigroup shares also moving lower as well. Citigroup down by 5.6%. The Trump administration is considering paying U.S. oil producers to leave crude in the ground to help alleviate a glut that has caused prices to plummet and push some drillers into bankruptcy. Today, we did see West Texas Intermediate crude advancing today by just about 1%. Royal Caribbean Cruises cutting its U.S. workforce by 26%. This, according to a report in the Miami Herald, didn't say where it got that information. Shares of RCL today down by 2.3%. Carnival Cruise Lines down by 1%. Norwegian Cruise Lines Holdings down today by 2.1%. Again, recapping, stocks lower with the S&P down 62 points. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, we do want to take you to Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont giving an update on the virus situation in his state. Let's listen in.
You see the tests themselves go up and down depending on a variety of variables. It's just incredible to me that there's a national shortage of swabs. Swabs are like Q-tips. How can this country not have enough swabs so we can accelerate the testing, which is so key to getting people back to work? But anyway, those are interesting numbers. I think you're probably noticing laboratory confirmed deaths. That's a big number, 197. What the hell is going on? In terms of the deaths that are reported out of the hospitals that we know, that number is consistent with what we're used to. We did have a catch-up here with about 170 folks, our citizens who sadly passed away. Often there's a catch-up because we don't know. They die at home. They don't die at a hospital. We don't know what exactly is related to the death. So those are catch-up numbers. But I think you should just take a look there and know that that death number does take us up to 868. The currently hospitalized, 129. We saw a downward trend that's leaking up a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. We can talk about that a bit. This is a trend that's sort of similar to what you've seen before. Fairfield, you see, was flattening out Fairfield County just a week ago, and today you see it ramping up a little bit. And I described recently that was a bit due to the flare-up in Bridgeport. Next, you see that New Haven was flattening out, ramping up a little bit as well. And finally, Hartford County. Next slide, please. This slide is really important because I always give you the net numbers. I always show you, This is the net increase in the number of people who are in ICU beds. And that's really important because that tells you about our capacity in our different hospitals. But it doesn't necessarily tell you the trend on infections, and that's registered by hospital admissions. The net numbers, admissions versus discharges, we have a lot of people being discharged. But in case anybody's getting complacent, you'll see the number of admissions in Fairfield County is going up as fast as it ever has. You'll see perhaps that while New Haven is leveling off a little bit in terms of that slant, Hartford is going up. So these are numbers that we track all the time, we think is a leading indicator in terms of what's going on. But basically, I think you see the numbers are still choppy. So there's been a little bit of hope out there that we weren't going up geometrically or exponentially like we used to say. There's still a lot of admissions in hospitals. That means that reflects infection rate. And that reflects the fact we still have some work to do. What's the next slide there? And that's it by counties. Let me just say a couple of things. One, this is April 15th. This used to be known as Tax Day. Not this year. This year our tax day is July 15th because we've been able to push that off as the federal government has also pushed that off to give everybody a little bit more breathing room in terms of managing their cash flow. And Tax Day always used to lead to tax protests. Well, today is not tax day, but there are still a number of stay-at-home protests around the country. And I was just on the phone with all my fellow governors, just giving a heads up on what's going on. Out of Michigan, I was sort of interested to hear that in Lansing, Michigan, there's Operation Gridlock. And cars are honking their horns in front of the state capitol saying, let's go, let's open up. It was reflected by the fact that the governor there put a cap on not being able to buy gardening and home improvement things, something we haven't done in this state, by the way. You can still do that. It gives you an idea of how antsy people are in terms of the stay-at-home order. One of the signs I thought was a little amusing, I don't mean to make light, but Michigan recently legalized marijuana and they've outlawed gardening equipment. So the sign said, we can smoke grass, but we can't cut the grass. It's the opposite here in this state, by the way. I noticed that we've had some petitions, for example, from salon operators here on this state saying, May 1, let's go, open up. It's time to open up. And that nobody wants to get opened more than we do. And we're going to spend a lot of time today and then, importantly, tomorrow when we announce the advisory board in terms of steps we are taking to get our state opened up. I know how important opening up is to our small businesses. I know the collapse in revenue. I know the fact that we've got, in part, a lot of supports in place from the Paycheck Protection and our own loan program, but that's not good enough. People are ready to open up. I was on the phone today with the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, and I was just reminded them that it's easy for me to stay at home. You've given me a really nice home. I can spend a week and not see Annie in the governor's residence. But there are a lot of folks who are multi-generational, living in really contained spaces in small apartments. They don't have a backyard, and stay at home is really tough. And I've got to ask people to tough it out a little bit longer. And I'm trying my best to make it easier for you. A lot of my fellow states are, shutting down parks and shutting down beaches. And I don't think that helps. All that does is squeeze people into more crowded outdoor spaces elsewhere. People still need to be able to take a walk at a safe distance. And Katie Dykes, our commissioner, it's her birthday today, by the way. Katie Dykes has, been tough about limiting the number of cars at beaches and at parks. And I hope that's good enough. I'm on the phone in an hour with all of our mayors and first selectmen. And I'm going to encourage them to go maybe even the opposite direction. Instead of closing down parks, maybe close down some of the roads to automobile traffic so people have more room, not just on sidewalks, but can, walk and enjoy themselves outside as the weather gets nicer in a boulevard. That said, working closely with others and looking at best practices around the country, I think it's time for us to also be really strict about the need to wear masks. even masks you make yourself, just the bandanas or the scarf or the surgical mask, not the N95 masks. They are reserved for our frontline healthcare workers. And, I wear this it's not a fashion statement, but if you're walking around and you need a little bit of space, you're going up to a group of people there, just put on your mask. If you're walking around in the park and there's a crowd, put on a mask. If they're crowded together, tell them they should keep their social distance, but you be careful as well. We're going to be very clear with our employers that if you're in a public space there, your grocery store and the such, retail, you've got to make sure that your employees are wearing masks. And anybody coming into that particular facility, starting with grocery stores, have to wear a mask. I think this is the way that we're going to get this virus behind us sooner and make sure that we can get everybody back to work as soon as we possibly can. So social distancing is key to that. We're getting the masks as fast as we can at the state level, but right now it's an employer's job and employees to make sure you're wearing that in any place where you have public interface with people. As I mentioned before, we're going to be ramping up the testing. You saw we had a lot of tests today, but that's conditioned upon the swabs. But remember, social distancing and testing and the therapies we're working on that keep people out of the hospital, at least out of the ICU, cut the amount of time they're there, are all a bridge to getting the vaccine. And that's how we eventually get behind this. That vaccine could be 6-12 months away. So we got to be extraordinarily careful in terms of everything you do between now and then to make sure we get this pandemic under control and to make sure we have a bridge to a vaccine that makes sure then we can get back to our life in the new normal as best we can. And I'll talk a little bit about the federal next supplemental that's coming out, but just remember, they've done $2.4 trillion. And Governor Baker from Massachusetts reminded us today that almost none of that is going to public health. Almost none of that is going to development of the new therapies we need or how we reconstitute existing therapies to apply to COVID. Almost none of that's going to vaccinations. We got amazing private companies, so many of them right here in the state of Connecticut that are working on these therapies, working on these vaccinations. But this should be our Apollo project. This should be a real focus of the federal government. This is how we get back to work and get our economy going in a real way if we put our money where our mouth is when it comes to, there. The PPP, the Paycheck Protection, some good news. That money is going out. They've already approved about $3 billion in loans for the state of Connecticut. That's to about 12,000 applications have been agreed to right now in the state. There's still money there. You can still go to the DECD or small business websites or 211 will get you the information you need so you can apply. The $1,200 checks are going out the door as we speak. They should be landing or direct deposit. That's $1,200 per person for everybody that files a tax return. And as we've said before, if you didn't file a tax return, you're still eligible, and go to 211 and we can get you the information you need on how to do that. I will tell you that the governors were really focused on this next supplemental coming out of Washington. It's been delayed right now. I think the Republicans are more focused on the PPP, the Paycheck Protection, more money for small business, get that going. It looks like the Democrats are focused on that, but also think we need another supplemental to support the states and the municipalities. I think they're both right, but we desperately do need more flexibility in terms of what we provide for the states and for the municipalities. Right now, the federal government reimburses us for COVID-related expenses, but not for a loss of revenue. And as I've said before, that we're in pretty good shape compared to our peers when it comes to making up for the loss of sales tax revenue and some income tax revenue. Other states are in real duress right now. But we're all going to need some backup here so we can round the bend on July 1st, knowing that our budgets are in pretty good shape. I think with that, I mentioned to you that Andy Mays, our amazing insurance commissioner, is on. And I'm going to steal some of his thunder because that's my prerogative. Sorry, Andy, but
all right. So you've been listening to Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont giving an update on the virus in his situation. The one thing I did think is about that I thought was notable was, pressing the federal government, the Apollo project, right? It's got to be about getting a vaccine so that we can, focus our attentions on that and get it done fast so that we can get out of this situation. I mean, I think the governors are feeling, pretty stuck. Not one state can do this on their own. Right. And so really putting some pressure on the federal government that can force companies or ask companies to collaborate maybe on a big government project.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting sort of line that these guys are walking because they want to have the authority over their states, and they do, and they are mostly guys, let's be honest. But at the same time, they do need the federal government, it sounds like, to be an organizer and an allocator. This goes back to something we've heard from Governor Andrew Cuomo a lot, this notion that you don't want governors and mayors essentially getting into an eBay type of situation where they're bidding against each other for vaccines or PPE or whatever it is. All right. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We'll probably skip over the movers. Can
I just mention one?
Please.
Arcus Biosciences.
Oh, yeah.
Stock is soaring in the after hours. It's up about 35%. Headline crossed the Bloomberg that Gilead Sciences is considering acquiring a stake in Arcus Biosciences. It's a cancer therapeutics company. It's backed by Alphabet. This is according to people in the know. And it has to do with Gilead. They've been buying a lot of companies into what's called cancer treatments that harness the immune systems to fight tumors. So it's a little bit more of a move along that lines. All right.
Taking a quick look at volatility, up a bit today, up about 8%, closing at 40.84. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up. Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson. Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson back with us. Your stock of the day. What's on your mind?
Well, this is one you've probably heard of, Jason. Chesapeake Energy. They're known as a shale oil and gas producer, especially in their home state of Oklahoma. They're known for co-founder Robert McClendon, who died 4 years ago in a car crash, and they're known for borrowing billions of dollars and then selling assets to shore up their finances. Chesapeake has been around since 1989, has been publicly traded since 1993. The ticker is CHK. Now, the shares have fallen for years, and last November, they dropped below $1, which put the company's New York Stock Exchange listing at risk. Chesapeake responded with a 1-for-200 reverse stock split, which took effect today. That means anybody who had 200 shares before only has one now. Anyone with less than 200 shares received an equivalent amount of cash. And Chesapeake traded at a record low after this reverse split. The stock also had its biggest ever loss, more than 37.5%.
Wow. That energy space, man. Just getting hammered. And we're not
absolutely.
And stock closed at $16.38 today. That's the equivalent of 8 cents and change before the reverse split.
It's just fascinating if you think about the last decade or so, even maybe the last 2 decades when it comes to energy, right? We thought oil just such a sure play, right? People were going to continue to tap into oil.
Right.
And we are still a long way from embracing in a big way alternative fuels. But what's interesting is just the glut that has been on the market and what it has done. And shale, of course, has increased to that glut that's out there.
Well, and at a time when consumption is nil. You know,
right.
you just think about what people aren't doing these days in terms of consuming. All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We will catch up with you tomorrow for your market insights, your chart, and your stock. Let's get over to Charlie Pellet. He's got some more headlines after the close. Hey, Charlie.
All right, thank you very much. I do want to begin with the oil story because West Texas Intermediate crude did a surge today, up 0.8%, $20.28 a a barrel plan may be in the works to pay American drillers to actually keep oil in the ground. West Texas Intermediate again up now by 0.9%. Bottom line, though, it was a Fed Wednesday, Beige Book Wednesday. We did see stocks decline. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all lower. S&P ended the day down 62, down by 2.2%. A lot of focus on the day's earnings news, a lot of focus on the day's bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data. Dow down 445 points, down 1.9%. NASDAQ down 122 points, down 1.4%. The 10-year yield 0.63%. Gold down 0.4%. 17.20 the ounce, and worth repeating on crude. WTI up today by 0.9%. 20.29 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And, as we read in the mornings, Carol, we're sort of separately sending each other notes. You're very good about your torrent of things that you find interesting, well known for that. And often I'm like, yeah. But there are very frequently ones that really pop to the top of the list that we just say, we got to talk to this person. And one of our go-tos clearly is Brooke Sutherland, Deals and Industrials columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Her column today, Fastenal got pandemic planning right. Well, they are in fairly small company in all of that. Brooke Jones is on the phone from Kansas. How are you, Brooke?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How is it out there?
I'm actually in New York. So my phone number is from Kansas. I'm born and raised in Lawrence. So I hold on to those Kansas roots and the Kansas phone number here.
Well, there you go.
Well,
all right.
how you've got family back there, right?
Yeah. How are the folks?
I do. They're good. They're hanging in there. My sisters are home from New York and London as well, so I feel like they feel like they've been transported back to middle school all over again.
But everybody's safe and sound.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
All right.
Glad to hear the same for you guys.
Yeah, we're doing okay, and everybody's healthy, which is most important. So tell us about Fastenal. First of all, I don't know that everybody knows who they are and what they do.
So I really follow this company. I follow the industrial sector, and Fastenal is a industrial distributor. So what that means is they're primarily known for fasteners, hence where their name comes from, but also, a wide variety of just your basic stuff that's used on the factory floor. So this can be, widgets, different parts, screws that go into products that are being made. It can be things that keep, the factory line running. It can be face masks. It can be gloves. It can be protective gear. It can even be, the coffee filters for the break room. And so they're really a company that helps manufacturers get what they need to actually manufacture products. And as such, their earnings can really be a tell on what to expect when some of these bigger companies start reporting. They're sort of on the front lines of seeing, what the demand is for manufacturers. If manufacturers are buying products from Fastenal, that's usually a good sign that their demand is holding up. And if they're holding off, then that can be, sort of a tell that you're seeing demand shift. And so I really was looking at the company's earnings from that perspective. I do this every quarter because it can be a really great indicator. But this particular call, I was struck instead by, the CEO started off by talking about, step by step, everything that the company has done over the past couple of months in terms of getting itself ready to deal with the pandemic. And I just thought it was very instructive, and it was very clear and very deliberate in terms of everything that they did. And it sort of becomes a case study in how to go about this the right way.
So what they say? What did they see or what did they take more seriously that maybe other people didn't?
Sure. So one of the things about Fastenal is that a huge part of their supply chain is in Asia. Mm-hmm. So because of that, when you started seeing these cases emerge in China, they took that very seriously, very quickly, and were very concerned about what that might mean for their supply chain and their ability to get products to their customers. So starting in about January, they were looking at key product lines and whether or not they needed to do more to sort of shore up the supply chain there. February 6th, they sort of sounded the alarm internally and said, hey, you know what, we're going to have to start vetting suppliers, backup suppliers for key cleaning products and safety gear. And, they really sort of sprung into action at that point. And I talked to the CFO yesterday on the phone, and he said, you know what, we had the infrastructure in place to do this because we already had to get very flexible because of the trade war. When the tariffs came down, all of a sudden it became very important to sort of flush out backup suppliers. And so they've already gone through this process and could turn that back on and start addressing the needs for the coronavirus crisis. And I, in listening to them describe this, talking about shoring up supplies in January and February, it just made me think about, as we look at the United States, and, we're still seeing states fight with each other over ventilators and masks. And, the AP had a great report about how the federal government didn't even start ordering those types of things in bulk until mid-March. And you just think about how different the world might look right now if the government had been acting at the pace at which Fastenal was in January and February.
I would love, an environment where we could talk to tons of CEOs, especially those who have global operations in Asia, and how early they were seeing problems. Because I do feel like you talk about that Fastenal actually sounded internal alarms on February 6th for all of its employees in terms of janitorial and protective gear products, to check in on that. So I do wonder, was federal government not listening to companies? What was going on? Because it really does feel like a lot of companies, publicly held companies and others really saw things, Brooke, way ahead of others. Just got about 30 seconds here.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the thing about this administration is the president has billed himself very much as a businessman. And, a lot of the response to the pandemic has been couched in sort of this corporate response. But when you look at what corporate America was doing, they were a lot more proactive on this front. They're very experienced with managing supply chains, and they moved earlier. So.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's a must-read, folks. I'll put it out on Twitter, and if not, you should check it out at Bloomberg.com as well, and also follow Brooke Sutherland. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It was a rough day for stocks as investors were bombarded by poor bank earnings and disappointing data on retail sales, home building, and manufacturing. The Fed's latest beige book showed the economy in full retreat. The Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled 445. The S&P 500 sank 63. The Nasdaq Composite fell 123. Bank of America and Citigroup ended lower after reporting first-quarter earnings that included large set-asides for potential loan defaults. Goldman Sachs rose thanks to strong trading results. JCPenney may be headed toward default. It will not make a $12 million interest payment due today, starting the clock on a 30-day grace period. Reuters reported this week that Penny is considering a bankruptcy filing. Honda continues to tighten its belt. The automaker plans to furlough several thousand salaried employees and support staff in the U.S. for 2 weeks. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The market's in focus every business.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went to high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course, Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to talk sports. Eben Novy-Williams going to be with us. Can't wait for that. First, let's get to Charlie Pellet with an update. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Jason Kelly. Happy Wednesday. Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta President Raphael Bostic says many American businesses will struggle as early as next month to survive amid coronavirus-related shutdowns. And he urged both governments and banks to provide relief quickly to help prevent widespread failures. It was a down day on Wall Street today. Stocks slumped. Treasury surged as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data all added to concern over a severe global recession. S&P 500 index did sink from a one-month high, all of its major groups dropping. Hillary Kramer is Chief Investment Officer at A&G Capital.
look at the way we bounced back since March 23rd. You know, you look at some of these companies and you realize that the market, you know, Wall Street, you know, as a group, we see that it's going to be much improved. That second half of the year, there's so much optimism around it. The big question is what happens with earnings.
And she was interviewed right here on Bloomberg Business Week. Speaking of earnings, among the banks out today, Goldman Sachs shares up by about 0.2%. Bank of America down 6.5% today. Citigroup also out this morning. Its shares dropped by 5.6%. Turned out to be a mixed day for a lot of the airline stocks after reaching preliminary deals to access billions of dollars in federal aid. Among some of the airline names today, we did see the shares of UAL today. UAL advanced by 3.1%, American up by 2.9%, Delta and Southwest both on the minus side. Delta down 0.8%, Southwest dropped by 5.6%. Again, the S&P down 62, down 2.2%, the Dow down 445, down 1.9%, NASDAQ down 1.4%, a drop there of 122 points. 10-year yield 0.63%, gold down 0.5%, 17.17 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.8%, $20.26 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellets. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's turn now to the world of sports. We like to check in on that. No one knows it better than Eben Novy-Williams, sports business reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from New York. So in the absence of actual games, video games, Eben, this is disappointing to me.
Yeah, this is esports are the only sports happening right now, and every league, if you're the NBA or the NFL, is looking at video games as a potential way of keeping fans engaged. That's the big point right now for all these leagues, all these teams, even athletes themselves with their own personal fans, is how do you keep the people who really like you engaged with your brand when the way they usually do it through live games aren't happening.
So I do wonder how many people, you know, are going to join in and do, you know, e-gaming at this point or e-games and then stay with it when sports comes back. I mean, is this really a significant opportunity, Eben, for folks to kind of do sports in the digital world and then stay with it, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, almost everybody I talk to in sports right now, the wider version of your question about what habits are we forming right now that are permanent and which ones are just temporary?
Yeah, exactly.
Is really the big question on everybody's mind. And you're right. In the gaming world, you know, everyone sees this as an opportunity. You know, if you own an esports team, there's more eyeballs on your team now than there were 2 months ago, for sure. And I think everyone feels like this is the opportunity to maybe create a long-term fan, right? If you have someone who watches, you know, we'll pick a league, Overwatch League, for, you know, 4 weeks because they need a competitive fix and they can't get their basketball playoffs. You know, if they can convert those people, that's fantastic. So, yeah, I think their goal is certainly to make this a permanent thing, not just a temporary thing during lockdown.
All right, so let's move to the world of real sports if we can and go around the horn, as they say. Eben, you know, what are you hearing in terms of when we may see live sports again? Because I feel like the picture just gets bleaker and bleaker as the days go on. And, you know, we had John Wertheim on this program last week, and he was like, listen, if you came up with the worst possible place to be to spread a virus, it is 60,000 strangers packed into one place.
Well, he did this great visual, right, like picture for us, like this whole idea of, you know, standing in queues, right, getting ready to like go into some big arena, right? You're not going to want to do that.
So what does it actually look like? What does the world of sports look like?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. And I think it's going to be a while, my guess, before we have a lot of people gathering for sporting events. So I think the immediate future is that once they're ready, sports are going to start opening up without fans. Mm-hmm. And if you're curious about who the first ones are, you kind of have to look at who can put on events with the smallest number of people. You know, UFC, my guess, is early May, you're going to start seeing UFC fights again. They feel pretty confident that they can host an event, televise it, and do it with about 50 people all told, you know, including athletes.
Right.
So that's a small number. You know, no big league can do that. I think WWE has also said they're going to be coming out with live events pretty soon. Golf is another sport that I would expect to see sooner than most, just because you can responsibly socially distance in a way that you can't for any sport that involves contact. I think you're going to see those sports, the combat sports that can do this on a shoestring budget with few people, and also, sports where you can distance yourselves being the first ones back. And I think it's going to be a little while before, NBA or NHL.
Jason and I both picked up on, you probably got it too, there's a media conference call tomorrow with the USTA CEO and executive director. They're going to talk about tennis.
Yeah.
What about something like tennis, right? There's distance certainly in the players, not in the fans watching, but what about something like tennis?
Yeah, tennis is a good question. Certainly the players don't, they're not making contact with each other as they are in a lot of other sports. A lot of those events are big and they're international, which I would imagine might be a point of concern as well. If you think about the Olympics, for example, one of the big concerns for athletes in the Olympics, obviously the size and the scale is enormous, but also you're asking athletes to come from literally every corner of the world to reunite in a specific place.
Yeah.
So if you think about the U.S. Open, it's the same thing. There's probably 25, 30 countries represented at the U.S. Open. All those people are home right now, most likely. So bringing people in from different places is tough as well.
So, Evan, 30 seconds left here. When do we start to hear about the fall sports, college football, pro football, especially?
I think soon. Those leagues want to wait as long as possible. They think there's an advantage to the fact that they don't really need to change anything specifically until September. But my guess is you're going to hear pretty soon about the NFL, or about college sports, especially because those are tied to educational institutions.
Yeah.
And those were among the first to shut down. So I think you might hear about them first before NFL.
All right. We will keep an eye on it. We didn't get a chance to talk about XFL. I wanted to ask you about that, but we'll have to bring you back soon. Evan Novi-Williams, love talking to him, sports business reporter for Bloomberg. Also, check out the Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast and radio show. It airs on this radio station Friday nights at 7 p.m. Wall Street time. You can also get it via podcast wherever you download your podcast.
It's one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Not ahead of ours, but maybe. Sometimes.
But maybe? All right.
Sorry, Jason Kelly.
Boy. All right. Let's get some world and national headlines now. Mark Mills has those. Hey, Mark.
Hello, Carol and Jason. Thank you. COVID-19 has now infected 2 million people around the world as the coronavirus marked another grim milestone. U.S. cases rose 3.5% from yesterday afternoon to 619,607, according to data compiled by Johns Hopkins University and Bloomberg News. That was lower than the 6.2% average daily increase over the past week. Deaths were up over the past day by 10% to 27,760. Governor Andrew Cuomo has ordered people in New York to start wearing masks in public. Republicans are ratcheting up efforts to paint China as the villain in the coronavirus pandemic, seeking to shift blame as President Donald Trump faces increased criticism of his handling of the crisis. The Trump campaign has sent out a fundraising email that accused China of lying about the outbreak and saying that the country must be held accountable, language that is harsher than the president has used himself. A new Internal Revenue Service webpage allows Americans awaiting $1,200 economic stimulus payments to find out when they will arrive, though high demand was causing some delays. The webpage lets recipients log into the Get My Payment tool to see when their payment will be sent and whether they will receive it by direct deposit or mailed check. A series of endorsements from Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, and today Elizabeth Warren have cemented the Democratic Party behind Joe Biden as the presumptive nominee, and shows that party leaders are trying to unite the once warring progressive and moderate wings of the party. Sidelined from holding public events, Biden has missed the full effect of the endorsements. Global News 24 hours a day on Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists. Mark Mills, this is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Are you interested?
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
The 2020 NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
Starting Thursday, April 23rd, ESPN Radio has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every round.
He hasn't made his last move at the position. He has a...
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home.
This kid's a competitor if you're looking at the plus side of him. And when your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come.
Don't miss the biggest event of the offseason, live on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll look at race, politics, and the pandemic.
Social distancing is critical, but you have to have a certain class position, really, to be able to fully engage that practice.
I'll talk with Kianga Yamada-Taylor. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective. Search the Hoop Collective to listen. 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. A beige book Wednesday. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declined today, with the S&P down 62 points. That was a drop of 2.2%. Treasuries surged as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data added to concern over a severe global recession. S&P, by the way, sinking from a one-month high. As for the 10-year, up 1 6/32, yield 0.63%. The Dow down 445 points, down 1.9%. NASDAQ down 122 points, down 1.4%. Again, the S&P lower today by 2.2%. Gold down 0.6%, 17.16 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4%. That's a gain of 8 cents, $20.19 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's head to Dallas. Easy for me to say. Jeff McElfresh is there. He's the CEO of AT&T Communications, joining us on the phone. Jeff, great to have you with us.
Yeah, it's nice to join you guys.
All right, so I got to start with something that I saw earlier in the week. I tweeted it. I know a number of people saw it. Carol, I'm not sure if you saw it. It's John Krasinski, some good news, and this was one of those, like, I'm not crying, you're crying sort of situations where, I mean, it was amazing what Krasinski was doing, and you guys played a part in this, backing up the frontline nurses and physicians. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate you calling that out. You know, there are times like this, just doing the right thing matters the most to most people. And very proud of AT&T and its heritage of service over the last 140 years. Today's unprecedented times are calling for us to take some unprecedented action. And as we scanned around and looked at the front lines and our heroes that are actually battling this COVID virus, we realized that our doctors and nurses are the true heroes on the front line. They're actually supported by the police and the fire and the EMTs. But in these hospitals, you know, these folks are critical for our country getting back to business and battling against this pandemic. And so, you know, we offered to let them on to our FirstNet nationwide first responder network access for a 3-month no charge for service, because we really didn't want our frontline responders there in the hospitals worried about having to find a way to get connected, because they're people too, and they need that connectivity to do their job and stay in touch with their loved ones, as you and I want to do as well.
Yeah, it was way cool. It was a very cool moment. So tell us a little bit. I mean, remind us what FirstNet is, because, you know, we live in a very different world from 20 years ago. You know, so many people go back to 9/11 and making comparisons about this. You know, these sorts of communications networks are just absolutely critical here. What have you learned in this crisis?
Yeah, Jason, that's a good call out. Back in 9/11, one of the things that we all recognized was we didn't do a good job of, or did not have infrastructure, I should say, that enabled our first responders to have quick, interoperable communications. And no matter what kind of crisis you're talking about, be it a pandemic, a hurricane, a fire, a flood, the ability for individuals to communicate, to serve their communities and tend to the front lines is critical. And so coming out of that learning way back, when the United States government elected to put forward a dedicated public safety network, and they called on AT&T with our heritage of service to build that network for them. And this wireless broadband infrastructure that we have stood up is a very special thing. It not only provides for a very prestige access, a privileged access, priority access to our frontline first responders, but it also facilitates the different first responder agencies across, police, fire, medical professionals to interoperate more seamlessly. And our network that we stood up there for the FirstNet Authority has got 2 years on it, turned 2 years old during COVID. And I can tell you, it is performing exactly as our country designed it to perform. And we couldn't be more proud of how it's serving in the COVID crisis right now.
Jeff, I got to say, it's just, really encouraging to hear you talk about what you guys are doing for first responders and just, as a company and as a corporate leader, just going out and taking action and just doing really what's the right thing to do. And I do wonder about the corporate community overall. Do you think enough are stepping up to kind of help in this situation, especially when we feel like in many ways the federal government, kind of has failed in taking care of a lot of people?
Well, I mean, I would offer that I've been in dialogue with many of our partners in the commercial markets, players that exist inside of the telecommunications industry, agencies of the U.S. government. We're all doing everything that we can. Really, there was no playbook for this. We're seeing some trends change. I would have never thought, for example, Carol, that we could operate a massive infrastructure with over 250,000 employees and be able to do that in a way where we're not physically located inside of our traditional administrative office space. We've had to make use of artificial intelligence to help our networks be self-resilient and heal themselves, as opposed to having technicians actually dispatch out to a location to repair a service issue. And so we're teaching ourselves in this environment how to do work and to make that helpful, right, to facilitate that.
Right.
We at AT&T will deploy other tools like enabling our employees to work from home, and especially when our children are out of school and we don't have anybody to watch them, providing for paid time off benefits,
right,
or stipends and bonuses for the mission critical frontline personnel that have to be on the job in order to keep the infrastructure working. I think corporate America is doing everything it can do, and specifically at AT&T, I'm very proud of what we've done here across the board.
Well, I do wonder, Jeff, that this has got to come with a lot of challenges, and excuse me, and while it's probably good for business to some extent with all of the streaming and everything going on, and the network being used a lot, you still got to get out and service the lines. You've got to do all those things. How much have you had to do sort of extra or unanticipated to make sure your workers are safe?
Well, we've had to make the common sense policy changes. If you think about supporting communications infrastructure inside of your home or my home, sometimes that requires a technician to actually get in there and troubleshoot and fix some issues. Well, while we've got a nationwide lockdown, if you will, we've had to add certain policies and procedures to ensure that not only are our technicians safe, but our customers that we serve are safe. And you do that through a couple of measures, things like the personal protective equipment that has been talked about across the media for the last 5 or 6 weeks, masks, hand sanitizers, gloves, hygiene protocols. We've also had to shift the way we actually staff certain facilities. If you think call centers, typically you'll have 2,000 to 3,000 employees working under one roof. We've had to pivot that workflow to those individuals for them to be able to do that from the confines of their own home while they shelter in place but continue to serve customers. And so there's a lot of shifts that we're learning, and I think we're not the only company that is dealing with this. I can tell you as a major supplier partner to a lot of corporate America, we've been called in to help our clients shift their workforce.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really fascinating period.
All right, we really appreciate it. We're going to leave it there. Jeff McElfresh is Chief Executive Officer of AT&T Communications, joining us on the phone from Dallas, and I do recommend that Krasinski clip. It's really good. All right, if you are listening in New York and San Francisco, stick with us. We've got the CEO of Box coming up next. If you're listening on 99.1 in D.C., you're going to tune in to Sound On with Kevin Cirilli. He's going to have a great show, as always. This is Bloomberg.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
When the judgment comes.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights. Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis of the latest wrestling storylines, turn on the WWE podcast.
Big Steve-al edition.
Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
Because now on the show, everybody's kind of the same size, but as soon as I saw you, it's been...
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll look at race, politics, and the pandemic.
Social distancing is critical, but you have to have a certain class position really to be able to fully engage that practice.
I'll talk with Kianga Yamada-Taylor. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It was a down Wednesday. Stock slumped. Treasuries surged as bleak retail, manufacturing, and home building data all added to concern over a severe global recession. S&P 500 index did retreat from a one-month high. All of its major groups fell. Financial shares slipped as Goldman Sachs' investment portfolio took a hit from the coronavirus pandemic, while Bank of America and Citigroup followed rivals in setting aside billions of dollars in loan losses. As for the financials, Goldman Sachs actually gained today by 0.2%. Bank of America down 6.5% today, and Citigroup shares tumbled 5.6%. S&P down 63, a drop of 2.2%. The Dow down 445, down 1.9%. Nasdaq down 122, lower by 1.4%. 10-year up 1 6/30. The yield 0.63%. What about that recovery in markets? Kathy Jones is fixed income strategist at Charles Schwab.
The worry is that because it's a healthcare crisis and not a financial crisis, that financing can only do so much, that we have to get past the healthcare crisis. And that's the worry that we have.
Retail sales posted a record drop in March. Thousands of merchants have closed shop to stem the coronavirus. States began closing restaurants and bars to dine-in customers last month and urged residents to shelter at home. One bright spot, though, grocery stores posted a record gain as Americans stocked up on essentials. But among some of the big retailers today, we did see declines. Macy's, for example, its shares dropped 7.6%. Target was down by 2%, and we did see see shares of Kohl's also declining today. Kohl's was down by 6.9%. Again, recapping stocks lower across the board here with the S&P falling 63 points, down by 2.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Well, our Bloomberg Intelligence analysis notes that the virus outbreak has aided demand for cloud collaboration software, and that includes like that coming from Box. Let's get more on what they are seeing and how they are managing through the virus. Aaron Levy is chairman, CEO, and co-founder at the Redwood City-based Box, and we find him on the phone from that city on this Wednesday. Aaron, great to have you here on Bloomberg Radio. How are you doing? How is your team doing through the virus?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having me, and great to be here. So we've been very, very focused as a company with our 2,000 employees on obviously first the health and safety of all of our employees, but secondarily making sure that we really help support our customers during this time. So our platform is used by about 100,000 businesses globally, including 70% of the Fortune 500, really to help them be able to securely access and share their data from anywhere. And so any company that is right now in a work from home or remote work environment, obviously needs secure access to their data and their information. And our platform is there to help them with that. So right now we're just 100% focused on our customers, making sure that they can get the most out of our technology right now while they're in this new way of working from a work from home environment.
Right. And so, Aaron, what are you learning? I mean, with all those customers and all those different businesses, and there's been, I think it's fair to say, we certainly have experienced it first and secondhand, a lot of scrambling out there. Like, what have you learned as you've talked to, sort of folks on the front lines, as it were, of trying to stand up their companies in a different way?